Hi, I'm Paula Mitten. Welcome to Yoga Teachers Masterclass. In this masterclass, you'll learn something unique from each expert to help you with your teaching skills. Today, I'm speaking with Christina Sell from the United States. Christina has been teaching since 1998. She's a teacher of teachers and she's author of multiple books. I'm delighted to welcome Christina as a speaker on our masterclass. She's an in-depth knowledge of the yoga practice and she's going to share that with us today. So thank you, Christina, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share.
So we'll start with a little bit about yourself for those who aren't familiar with your story. If you want to tell us just a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, in terms of my yoga background, I got started in yoga in 1991, and I was introduced to yoga through the Iyengar Yoga School. So my background is in the alignment-based practices, and it's kind of not a very big hello to yoga story. You know, I was introduced to it, I liked it, I didn't get hooked right away. I was dabbling in and out of other things, other physical sports and things like that. I got a little bit more serious about it in 1999, 1998. And around that time, I also had the opportunity to start teaching. So while I practiced, I don't have a story that so many people have, like, and yoga changed my life, you know? It was like, well, that's pretty good. And I would practice. I practiced a lot on my own, and I'd go to workshops and classes, but I didn't get really, I think, sort of anchored in a daily practice till around 1998, 99. And then it really started to unfold for me a little bit more passionately and a little bit more focus, I guess. So around that time also, I was introduced to Desiree Rumbaugh and John Friend and spent a lot of time studying in the Anusara Yoga system and got certified with them in around 2003. And so, you know, I've always just been interested, even before I had an asana practice. I was interested in spirituality, and part of my story also includes recovering from an eating disorder. So finding ways to have a healthy relationship with my body and sort of start to bring mindfulness to my relationship to food and my own self-talk. All of that's been a huge part of my interest, even before I was introduced to the asana practice. So sometimes people say, how did you get interested in yoga philosophy? And really my interest in philosophy and spirituality was first. And I discovered asana along the way. And again, it wasn't an all or nothing thing for me. It was really something that was like a seed that got planted, and I would kind of keep coming back to it, and it just continued to grow within me like that.
Great. Sounds good. It's a nice natural progression, right?
Yeah, very organic. I didn't make a lot of plans about any of this. It's sort of unfolded fairly by the seat of my pants, really.
Brilliant. And so how did that lead into the teacher training programs and working with students who teach or who want to teach?
Yeah, I started, I have a background in fitness teaching. So I was teaching fitness classes since I was 18. And so being in front of a room, I always tell people, I've been in front of a room in a leotard over half my life, you know. And there's a lot of similarities, you know, it's a little bit different subject matter, but there's a lot of similarities about helping people move and find ways to be in their bodies in healthy ways. And so around 1998, I started to have some opportunities to teach, where I was also teaching fitness classes to teach yoga. And then my friend opened up a yoga studio and asked me to teach at her studio. That was around 1999, I believe. And I went to my teacher at the time, who I still work with. He's a senior Iyengar teacher. And I asked him, oh my God, someone asked me to teach. Am I going to be like shocked in a few years that I started teaching now and I don't really know anything? And he said, of course. And he said, everybody teaches too soon. And he said, but the best way to deal with that is that you stay a student and always have someone who's senior to you that you feel comfortable asking questions, that you're running into problems with your students, have someone you can ask. And then also he said, as beginning teachers, just teach those things that you know how to do. Don't teach things you can't do. He says, later, you'll be able to teach things you can't do because you'll have a better understanding. But he said, just start really simply, remember you're a student first, keep in contact with, a senior teacher and like that. So I started teaching a couple of years. Within about a year later, I had an opportunity to open my own place, and I went forward with that. And so around 2005, my students wanted a teacher training. So I thought that was sort of a little bit like a big, scary thing, I guess I would say. I didn't think, oh yeah, I want to run teacher trainings. It was really that my students wanted a teacher training, and we lived in a small town, and they wanted to study with me. And so I offered a teacher training. And then I liked it. I really enjoyed the different level of, there's kind of a wonderful set of skills we develop as yoga teachers, where you talk people through the poses and learn how to do demonstration, observation, sequencing, all of the teaching skills. And it's very interesting too when you add on another layer to that about how is it that we teach someone else to do that. Yes. And so now sometimes I'm even in workshops where most of my students in the workshop are running teacher trainings of their own. So we're talking about how to teach people to teach people to teach people. And so each layer is a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more challenging and rewarding as well. So it is another example of I didn't really plan to teach teachers. I really had the opportunity to have a studio, and then also my students asked for it. And so I took that as a sign, well, okay, let's go forward and do that. And then it led to some other opportunities. And each cycle, I still am training teachers and continuing to learn. And one of the best things about teaching yoga, I think, is how much it can help us as teachers clarify what we know and what we don't know. And then also, and when we train teachers, which is a whole other level, like I said, it asks us to step up a little bit and say, oh, if I'm asking you to teach this way or to do these skills, I have to model that. And so it's a nice incentive to stay on a growing edge and to keep working on the craft of teaching, not just the practice of the asana or the meditation.
Yes, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, I've read a lot about your style of teaching. Can you talk to us a bit about your style of teaching as a yoga teacher?
Well, one thing to understand about my style of teaching, I think, too, is to know I do have my roots going back into the alignment-based practices. Mm-hmm. So when I learned yoga, it was in a small situation. There were class levels. There wasn't a lot of choices. So I think today, when we think about the landscape of modern yoga, the average person starting yoga has so many choices, it's got to be overwhelming. Yeah. I was living in a small community. There was one yoga teacher. She taught Iyengar yoga. That's why I started there. It wasn't because I surveyed all these different choices and made the best choice. There was one teacher, there was one class, I went to it. Yeah. But that's where my roots are, and I've always appreciated that. And but I also am a little bit what I call a yoga mutt. I have dabbled around from spending plenty of time studying in the Ashtanga Vinyasa systems and what I consider also the more free-form Vinyasa, playing around with them. And like I said, I was a certified Anusara yoga teacher for years. So one of the things I loved about that practice and that style is that we had a lot of there was both movement, and vinyasa was part of it, but there was also fair game that you would stop and explain and demonstrate. So I feel in general that I have a very versatile style of teaching, and yet I'm known for the kind of start and stop approach of teaching alignment and teaching the how-to of the yoga. When I have students that I'm teaching very regularly who are already pretty seasoned and skilled, you might see more movement in my class, a little bit more creative vinyasa sequences to link up some of the stuff we've been analyzing. So I don't consider that the kind of movement-based vinyasa practices are really actually that different from alignment. I think that they've gotten really different because of the industrial aspect of yoga. I say the industrial complex of yoga, that we want to put something on a schedule that people know what to expect when they walk in the door. And that's very fair. I think that's good business, As a consumer, as a student, I want to know what I'm getting myself into, But I think that sometimes what that's created is this idea that if you analyze poses and learn the how-to and break them down and do what we call alignment or form classes, that somehow you can't do vinyasa. And that over here in Vinyasa, there's no how-to and there's no analysis and there's no, I think that those are a little bit false dichotomy, what I call a false dichotomy. They seem different on the surface. And I think about when you walk into the door of yoga, like if you walk in through the door of Vinyasa and you walk in through the door of alignment, you're going to have different experiences in that first room. But eventually I think they open into other rooms where there's a lot that they share in common, even though the methods of teaching are in common. So my teaching style has actually changed a lot the more that I teach workshops and the more that I teach as a guest teacher. Because as a guest teacher, you know, I get on a plane, I fly into some town, and sometimes I know the students very well, but sometimes not. So I can't assume if I say one pose name that everyone knows what I mean. Because there's so many, Virabhadrasana 1 could look different in New York and different in California. And so just the one word, it means this to some people, this to some people. It just means different things. So I rely on a lot of that start and stop explanatory teaching more on the road than I do in a public class with familiar students who we already share a language. And I like all different styles of yoga practice, and I practice sometimes very start and stop and very almost analytical in my own practice. But then sometimes I need to move and kind of break up lethargy in my mind and my body, and I'll put on music. So I'm, like I said, I'm really kind of a mutt. And, but I do find that because of the way that I teach, where I have larger groups with people I don't know very well, and that they're always mixed levels, that I feel like I can keep a group moving along if I start, stop, explain. Whereas when I lead a group of strangers through a vinyasa style practice, I'm looking at people dropping like flies and I get really worried. So I feel like I can manage a group a little bit better that I don't know with that alignment oriented. But I incorporate some philosophy. I always like a good sermon and a good pep talk occasionally. So and I'm very sarcastic and I have a big sense of humor. So I do laugh a lot when I teach, and hopefully to get students to have a sense of lightness about the difficulties of yoga practice, because as wonderful and rich as it is and life-changing as it is for so many of us, it's difficult at times where we run up against where we're stiff or where I don't want to listen to that explanation, or I just want to skip that pose, or I don't want to do another. All of our issues are going to come up, and I find that the more we can laugh about that, not at ourselves, but kind of with the predicament, that it loosens up shame, it creates community, and that's real important to me too.
Brilliant. Yeah. That was a great answer. I mean, something that I think on teacher training, or as new teachers, you're always asked to to find your teacher's voice or to have your unique style. Can you talk just a little bit about that in terms of what it means, or why it's important?
Yeah, well, I always tell new teachers to spend a year getting their students from the first Om to the last Om. And that's really a big task, just not having an anxiety attack, being in front of a room, just that basic arc of a class, opening Om to closing Om. Yeah. And that is a lot to manage in the first year of teaching. So I feel like at that point, if you had, as a new teacher, if you had good teachers, then I personally don't think that there's anything wrong with emulating your teachers to a high degree, because they've already worked out a lot of kinks. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, I know that people worry about sounding like they're parroting or they're mimicking, but I have really great teachers, and I strove to emulate them and mimic them because they were so good that I was like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to stand on the shoulders of greatness. Yeah. So if someone has already worked out a lot of kinks in their teaching, you can get a lot of shorten the learning curve as a new teacher by paying close attention to what a senior teacher who's skilled, not just popular, because sometimes we emulate the wrong things. We're not discerning enough to say, oh, well, they're popular, it must be good. Sometimes it's just popular. Yeah. you know, and sometimes it's good and not popular, and sometimes it's both. And so that's new. Later, I think what starts to happen is, I do think that the natural voice and who we are, it starts to arise over time. So while there's a lot of emphasis in it, in the teacher training world about being authentic as a teacher, I think in some ways it does happen without a lot of, it's going to happen in time anyway, because part of what we're doing is getting our skill set as new teachers, how to cue, how to keep it an active command so people really know they're supposed to do something, how to make intelligent sequences. If you want to dabble in a theme, that's even more. And over time, once you've got those skills, they become like a habit. I think about it like when you're learning a song, you know, like a pop song on the radio, and you don't know the words, but you know the chorus. Right. Then you're like, you can really belt it out and be real free on the chorus, and then like in the middle part, like la la la, I need the album cover. We used to have album cover. I need the lyrics. Yeah. But then once you know and have the heart of the song memorized, then you can belt it out really freely. So I think that with teaching, there's a lot of things that are not going to feel comfortable, authentic. They're going to be mimicking our teachers. They're just going to be the like learning the lyrics of the song. Right. And then there are going to be moments in those early days of teaching where we know the chorus and we're like, I'm on it. And then moments where it's like, I don't remember what to say. I got to look at my notes. Yeah. And then over time, I think we just have more and more of the lyrics of the different songs of our yoga class memorized. And it becomes what I say in my trainings is like a structure that spirit can move through. So all of the authentic spirit that we want to offer, our own connections, and we get more over time, I think, confident at not just teaching what our teachers taught, but teaching what it is that we've done with what our teachers have taught. Yes. And what it's become inside of us. Like my teacher always taught it this way, and I used to teach it this way, but I found this also works. And we start to, that takes a long time to develop in our life of practice, in our life of teaching, and certainly as we grow up, it just, oh, like what I know about life is different than it was when I was first on the path. Yes. You know, and I was like, oh, what does it really mean? Like the difference between falling in love, staying in love, falling out of love, falling back into love, you know, whether that's the same person or not. So all of that just takes time to grow into. So I'm a big fan of learning some rote skills and worrying less about authenticity in the beginning, more about structure. And then knowing that as those structures solidify inside of us, it's going to create something that's really, that can hold the power of spirit when it moves through us. Yeah, that's kind of my thought on that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love so just one last question.
Yeah.
You know, you've written a book called My Body is a Temple. And, you know, we hear all the time, and we say it all the time to our students to listen to their body and to honor their body. How can we encourage that more as teachers without, you know, in other ways? Sometimes I think, like you say, listen to your body, and students, it just goes over their head. They don't know what you mean, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I think too that I know from my own experience that listening to our body is multi-leveled. Yeah. And so there's really where many of us come to yoga practice and we're at odds with our body. You know, for me, like I was sharing earlier, I have an eating disorder background, compulsive exercise background. So I was not in touch with my body because anytime it was hungry, I might have starved it or overfed it. And so it wasn't even simple signals. They had been disrupted. And think about how many children on long car rides with their kids with their parents get told, they say, I have to pee. And the mom says, no, you don't. And they're like, yeah, I do. And it's a silly example. Yeah. But I remember being that child, and I'm sure if I'd had kids, I'd end up saying the same thing. And so there's just a lot of ways I think our culture and living modern life has separated us from what the messages our body's giving us and our capacity to hear them. And so I think that while we all mean well when we say, listen to your body, it falls short of actually training someone how to do that. And some people come to yoga and they have not just that kind of separation from just modern life, but let's say they were a dancer, perhaps. Sometimes people have this fantastic proprioceptive capacity, like they know where they are in space, they can make the shapes perfect right away, but they might have not been listening to their body. All of that skill to know where their body is in space, maybe they learned that in dance where they had to dance through a lot of pain. Yeah. So their pain threshold is different than the average person. So there's so many complexities to it that I think that it's not necessarily something that we can do. We certainly can't do it all at once, and we can't do it for anybody. So, and everybody is a little bit different. So I do think that there are ways that we can encourage it more experientially. We have to know that for many of us, it's going to be, and for our students, it's going to be a 10-year project, this listening to our bodies. Because, for instance, I have students and I say, straighten your arm, and they really think their arm is straight. Yeah. And if they're listening to their body, it's straight. They're not listening to me. So to me, it's once again, some of those overlaps where we want students to listen to themselves. We also have a different vantage point on what's happening in their body as teachers, because we're looking at the outside of the yoga practice. They're experiencing it on the inside. And so that takes a long time to say, I swear to God, my arm was straight. It feels straight. My body's telling me it's straight. So we're actually overcoming ignorance with one another. You know, this is not the deep level ignorance, but it's a start. Like, oh, I thought it's straight. I don't even know where I am in space yet. So our outside eyes of saying, hey, a little straighter, or look at yourself in the mirror, or you know what, I know you feel like you're working hard, but they're not quite straight. And those assists, that is not separate. That outside in help isn't separate from listening within, because sometimes we don't know how to interpret what our body's saying and doing yet. We're creating those pathways of awareness. And so I think that that is one thing to know, that we can't be afraid of giving that outside feedback. It's not counter. At the same time, we have to have ways, you know, for me in my work, I do a lot with sequencing classes so that everybody's doing a basic shape, and then it progresses, and that people, what I kind of always say is, you can get off the bus along the ride. And so sometimes that is can help. And I think that really what we're looking for this listening to your body is a long-term project. And we can say it, but like you said, the reason why it's not landing is because it's a skill like every other skill. And in some ways, all of our teaching methods, when I teach and I say, step your leg back, you know, and I'm saying, then I'm looking and I'm using observation skills, go, no, further back. And all of those things are starting to build in the student those pathways of understanding to, like, where is my body in space? To we say things like, firm your muscles, and we go touch them, we're like, no more. And then we have to say how to turn those muscles on. And that starts to build, okay, listen to my body. It's not just stop when something hurts, although that's part of it, but it's much richer and deeper, I think, that we start to look just from where we're in space to how to engage the muscles, to how to feel more subtle flows of energy. And all the while, we haven't even talked about what's going on in our mind and whether we're beating up on ourselves or not. Or we're mad at the teacher because we don't understand what they're saying, or we hate the music, or it's too hot. I mean, all that's happening too. So it is, I think, for the wonderful gifts and boons that it gives us, there's a lot of big things to walk through on the path of being a student and being a teacher of yoga. It's beautiful, uplifting, and a lot of it doesn't come for free. There's a lot of work we do on ourselves to get those boons and those gifts and that sense of grace that it gives so many of us. So that's not a specific answer, but I do think it's all aiming there, and that we have to know that as important as this class is that we're teaching right now in front of us, that the student, or if we're the student in that moment, is one class in the scope of what is hopefully going to be a lifetime of practice. And so we want to practice as safely and conservatively as possible so that we can go the distance, but we're not going to be able to give our students everything each class. And as a student, even if my teacher was that good, I couldn't take it in, you know? So I feel like we have to be patient with ourselves as students, and also recognize that the arc of learning and practicing and walking the path, it's a long road. And so it's in our best interest to be as kind and as, in a sense, as patient with ourselves as we can. And the fact that it is long is also what's going to cultivate that patience. You start to realize that if you're a go-get-em, strong type A person, it's going to be impossible to do it quickly. It's just not going to respond after a time. Your yoga practice won't respond over time to that same kind of approach. So it teaches us at every turn.
Great. Thank you. So we just run a little bit over.
Yeah.
I could talk to you all day, but I believe you have a free gift to offer the audience for anyone who would like to avail of it. Do you want to tell them what it is?
Yes, this is speaking of being kind and loving to oneself over the long course of practice. That made a very simple loving kindness meditation that you can download onto your phone and listen to. It's about, I think, 11 or 12 minutes. It won't take you a long time. It's just a centering practice that'll invite you into your own heart and into a quality and mood of love that you can offer yourselves and others.
So anyone who wants to avail of that, there's a link beside the video and you can click on that. I'd like to say a massive thank you again to Christina. It was an absolute pleasure to speak to you. So knowledgeable, and like I said, I could continue to talk to you all day, but I know you have things to do. So, and thank you to everybody for watching today. Remember to tune in again tomorrow. Each expert will share something different that will help you with your teaching journey. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you so much, and thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.